Here's the 8-inch Winchester chassis from the late 70s, maybe early 80s. This is showing the size of the disc, 5 1/4 inch, 5 1/2 inch. Here's the rotary or linear actuator. Here's the disc. Here's a dollar bill for scale. And here's an actuator worked on back in the mid 80s. You can see how small it is. This was for a 3 1/2 inch drive, very early prototype, and it's extremely small. It's a linear drive. It had there's the capstan that drove it. It had a band, and it's very, very small, if you can see that. And so you can see, even though you may wonder that here's a guy that was built for probably a 20 megabyte drive in the 80s or mid 80s, mid to early 80s, as a 3 1/2 inch Winchester disk drive, 3 1/2 inch. At the time you can prototype, you're working on things that are this small, and in production, or maybe at the end of the era, these things were basically being replaced. So you got these big, huge things that are actually people were still using in that era, and actually to store data. And at the same time in production, you've got these little bitty things that you were designing in the lab. But basically, this is the same type of thing. You've got a rotary, linear actuator through here, and this is the same thing where it's got the bearings that ran on a rod, little bitty bearings, and a stepper motor or linear motor drove this little capstan on here. It's all corroded because it went underwater in Katrina, but just wanted to show you the size of scale, that while this was in preliminary prototype stage, you had things like this that were, the wall castings on these were a 1/4 inch thick, and these were still in use at that era and still being used as old stock and things like that. And you've got little bitty guys like this that were being built in prototype stage. Today, all the disk drives, you use a rotary actuator that moves back and forth. At that time, most of the disk drives were linear, go back and forth like this, or at least a lot of them were.